Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Sorry we had a little bit of technical difficulties, which is pretty much expected and on par for this for this time of COVID services and COVID Yom Kippur and such as it is. And I just want to thank Pam Kocher and the rest of the staff for doing such an amazing job getting us to you. So I hope that all of you have so far had a really meaningful Yom Kippur. And it occurs to me every year that Yom Kippur is by far the best day of the year to meditate, because we already had this sense of humility from the lack of food, which gives us empathy for those who fast many days of their lives unwillingly, and because they suffer. And also because it helps us to free our thoughts from all of the other things that we think that we need to get done, we need to prioritize, that we need to accomplish. We can somehow get into a zone where this is the only day that matters right now. Right now, there is no Tuesday morning. There will be a Tuesday morning, God willing, but right now, there's only Yom Kippur. It's one of the only days of the year we don't specifically plan or think about other things while we're going through it, while we're practicing it. And it's a really, really important teaching that this is really the way we need to live our lives every day, or at least aspire to. We know that it's hard to live your life like that, to be able to be in the moment all of the time and not think about anything else. But on Yom Kippur, we have that in its purest form. The only thing we're thinking about next, right now maybe, is when is the next service of the day? What's the next prayer that I'm saying? When is the next conversation? Because Yom Kippur, we know, is a day devoted to prayer, to study, and to introspection. That's what it's devoted to. There's nothing else going on during the day. Even on Rosh Hashanah, there's a lunch, there's a meetup that you had, maybe you meet your friends in the park, you do whatever. Yom Kippur is really all about staying in one place, being in one place, and doing that not just physically, but also mentally and spiritually. So this is just sort of an intro to get an idea of why and how Yom Kippur are so powerful for us as a way to meditate. So today, I want to take a couple of the all-hate prayers, which, as you know, are these litany of different apologies that we make for committing different acts. Many of them against our fellow human beings, some of them against God. But I was thinking about one in particular. Which means we have sinned against you with the sin of arrogance. But Einayim Ramot means lifted eyes, right? That we think that we're better. We think that we're better than our fellow peers. We think that we're better than our competitors at a job. We think we're better than whomever. And this is a really, really difficult one for most of us to overcome. The sense of competitiveness, the sense of comparing ourselves to other people, especially living where we do, the competitive nature of this, the DMV area. So I want to start with that, the whole idea of condescension, the sin of condescension. We all practice it all the time. We all say, can you believe that so-and-so? That's condescension. It's gossip and it's condescension, because we're actually, pretending for a minute that we're better, that we could have done better, that we do better than other people do. So I'm going to start with that and do like a 10-minute meditation with that, and then we'll move on to another of the al-khaits to focus on. But this, I want to give you one more intro to this before we start. And one of my pieces that I study as a classical singer, in addition to Hazzan, is Mendelssohn's Elijah. And one of the settings within Mendelssohn's Elijah, Elijah is saying, it is enough. "O Lord, now take my life, for I am not better than my fathers." And in his situation, he's expressing this frustration that he hasn't done any better, he hasn't advanced anything. But really, this is like humility to say, I'm not better than anybody. I'm not better than my fathers. I've tried my best. It turns out I'm not better than anyone else. I thought maybe I could be. I thought maybe I was. I'm not. I'm not. Moshe dying on the mountain is a similar image. We think of Moses as above everybody else. He doesn't get to go into the promised land. We don't know where he's buried. One of the reasons why we don't know where he's buried is that we don't make out of him an idol. So all of this is to say that arrogance, thinking we're better, is something that we have to practice releasing. So let's start with a few deep breaths. And your mantra can be, I am not better. open our eyes here. I hope that this meditation of I am not better, even if your mind tends to stray, which we all have thoughts that tend to go here and there, you let them pass by and you think of yourself just in this one moment, whether you're in your living room or your basement or wherever you happen to be, you're watching this with us. You know, imagine that you're in the synagogue as you normally would be on Yom Kippur, and we're simply just sitting here and experiencing this moment right now and not judging the moment or judging whether or not we have lived lives that are worse or better than anybody else, but that we are simply here, which is one of the messages of Yom Kippur, is the message of humility. So now I want to talk about God, because I was sitting there thinking about I am not better and thinking how, you know, having a meditation session on Yom Kippur, not mentioning God, is a little strange, possibly sacrilegious, depending on your point of view. So I think about some of the biblical names of God that we don't hear very often anymore. We don't really use that often in prayer, and yet on the high holidays they come storming back. My favorite name for God has been for a while is Shaddai, which there's a bit of an argument, a bit of a, I guess, debate about what the actual meaning of it is. The word itself appears to us in Bereshit when God says to Abraham, I am El Shaddai, walk with me, and your numbers will be many. And this word, according to scholars, has a couple of meanings. One, it's thought of as an acronym, which means Shomer Daltot Yisrael. The Shin, Shomer, the Dalet Daltot in Yisrael, for the Yud. Of course, that refers to the mezuzah and to the Passover, the Exodus. But there's also another definition, which I think is, I guess, in and of itself is a little bit more meditative, which is it's two different words in Hebrew, Shaddai. Those of you who speak Hebrew know that the word dai means enough, and Shah is that. And so Shaddai together would mean that which is enough. That God's self is enough. That we don't need other gods, right? This is sort of like statement of monotheism within the name Shaddai, which makes a lot of sense because, of course, Abraham is credited with being the first monotheist. So the idea that God came to Abraham and said, I am El Shaddai, walk with me, is plausible. Monotheistic God that Abraham encounters. So when we are in the sanctuary on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah, we hear the prayer Hineni. We have, this word Shaddai. Shaddai Ayom Menorah. Ayom Menorah meaning like fearful and great, awesome and great, and Shaddai. And it's sort of this ancient word that I think pulls in some warmth for God's presence that we, I think, don't often experience on the high holidays, or it's a little bit unusual because we're so busy addressing God as the judge, and asking for forgiveness and asking for salvation and asking to be written in the book of life and salvation and all those other kind of things. And then suddenly during the prayer, the Hineni, we say Shaddai Ayom Menorah, like referring to God again as like the first iteration of God, so to speak, that appeared to Abraham. And we're always asking things on behalf of Abraham. And so this idea that Shaddai, it gives us comfort as we say it, as we appeal to God's Rahmanas, right? We appeal to God's sense of mercy for us. One of the reasons that I like Shaddai, and then of course, Shaddai as a mezuzah to Shaddai as a protector. So we don't just appeal to God as a judge, but all of a sudden that judge turns into a protector, which is beautiful. So, so we're going to meditate for another 10 minutes or so on this idea of Shaddai, that God is enough, and also that God protects us, right? That as we sit here and meditate, that we are surrounded by love and affection from our Creator. So I think an idea that is probably not so common in the Yom Kippur liturgy, right? That we are protected. So you can either use the name Shaddai as you breathe in and out, or you can use this idea of God as your protector. slowly open our eyes now. And I was thinking while I was meditating that there is one exception in the liturgy to this idea of pleading with God for mercy, and that's Ki anu amecha, which is all about seeking God's love and protection and affection based on these beautiful metaphors. Ki anu vanecha v'ata Eloheinu. We are your children, you are our God. We are your people, you are our God. Anu vanecha v'ata Adonenu. We are your children, you are our master. You are our father. It's all these beautiful metaphors that are contained in this prayer. Anu charmecha v'ata notzreinu. We are your vineyard, and you are our vintner. We are your faithful ones, and you are the faithful one. Anu mamiracha ve'ata mamirenu. This idea, like stuck in the middle of the liturgy with all the other pleas for salvation, for mercy, reminds us that there's this other relationship where we are like children. Right? We say, Avinu Malkeinu Chanenu V'Anenu, right? Our Father, our King, with love, save us, answer our prayers. This whole idea of parent and child, you look at a small child, at your own children when they're young, and see how fragile they are, how weak and fragile their bones can be, and how easily they can get hurt. And we think about ourselves as big, strong adults who aren't supposed to get hurt, who aren't supposed to feel pain, who aren't supposed to cry, who aren't supposed to run to a protector for help. And yet, that's exactly what this liturgy is encouraging us to do, to run to God for some kind of help and consolation, that we don't really allow ourselves that, anymore. We don't allow ourselves that because we think that we're too big and too grown up and too mature to ask for protection and help. And as I was sitting here, I was just noticing that, we are only the creations of God. We're only small little creations here. And we can ask. We can ask for help when we feel fragile. We can focus on our own fragility sometimes. Because focusing on our own fragility can also help focus us on our own humility. So our last meditation here is going to be about this idea of when we've sinned against you knowingly and unknowingly. Now the knowingly is relatively straightforward. We do something even though we know it's wrong. Unknowingly is very complicated. We sinned against you unknowingly or unwittingly, but we don't put ourselves in situations where we could, even if we don't mean to, right? So this is kind of the idea. But I like the thought about we have to be careful of the unknowing as well as the knowing. We don't get to get away with something just because we didn't know. As one of my teachers in high school used to say, there's no excuse for ignorance. I suppose that's part and parcel to this prayer or to this apology, knowingly and unknowingly. So there's this beautiful idea that we're responsible for everything we do, even if we could defend ourselves, let's say in a court of law, that we really didn't know and it wasn't our fault. And this is, again, back to the parent and child metaphor, where we want to blot out our children's sins sometimes, but we also want to teach them the right thing, that they have to take responsibility even when they think they didn't do anything wrong, or even when it wasn't really their fault. That somehow this is part of spiritual growth, it's part of maturity, that they have to get better even when they know that it's not as black and white as whether or not they're wrong. And that's the same for us. we have to deal with that as well. We have to deal with the idea that we have to take responsibility, whether or not we were overtly wrong, or whether or not we got caught, I suppose. So it's a level of, I think, self-perspective and self-analyzation that is difficult. But we sinned against you knowingly and unknowingly. We're even sorry when we didn't do it on purpose. We're going to be extra careful. This is what religious, I would say very religious Jews call, or what we all call, putting a fence around the Torah, right? This is how, in the very religious community, they could prevent themselves from committing sin, is from putting fences and fences and fences so that they can't do things unknowingly, so they can't make any mistakes. But this is more about accepting the fact that we have to own our mistakes even when they're not purposeful mistakes. Even when we didn't think we spoke to somebody badly, we didn't think we did Lashon Hara, but actually we did. Right? We didn't think we hurt somebody's feelings, but actually we did. Or we didn't think we took the Lord's name in vain, but actually we did. So, knowingly and unknowingly, we take responsibility for our sins, and we ask for forgiveness. Chaneinu vaneinu, Chaneinu vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim, Ki ein banu masim, Chaneinu vaneinu, Aseh imanu, Tzedakah v'chesed, Aseh imanu, Tzedakah v'chesed. Avinu, Avinu, Malkeinu, Avinu, Avinu, Malkeinu, Avinu, Avinu, Malkeinu, Avinu, Avinu, Malkeinu. Thank everybody for joining me for this meditation. We started off talking about Einayim Ramot, condescension, not being better than anybody else. We continued talking about God as Shaddai, as the protector, talking about Kianu Amecha, appealing to God as our Father and as our Creator. And lastly, taking responsibility for ourselves, even in difficult situations, even when we quote know that we're right. So I wish you much spiritual growth this Yom Kippur, a meaningful rest of your fast, and I hope you'll join us for the rest of our activities today and join in this community. Gemar Chatima Tova.